the Misfits of Real Estate on this lovely Thursday afternoon.
What is
I'm
up?
just back. I'm just back from Vegas where the weather was actually nice, and I'm in Rochester. The sun is shining, but it's still only 47 degrees. But at least the sun's out.
So how's it going, man?
Oh, it's going really good. I'm recharged from the trip. We did the GRAR awards ceremony last night. That was a good time over at the Strong Museum. It's
Okay.
actually a really nice spot for hosting an event. So we might want to think about using that for FRIA in the future.
Oh yeah, no, we're going to the Strong Museum of Play for the Mayor's Ball actually in a couple weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, super fun, especially without the kids. So
Right. Yep.
So big news in housing in New York State this past week for sure. Good cause eviction. Have you been following it?
I have not. I've been on vacation. So bring me up to speed.
Okay. All right. So good cause eviction has been a law that tenant advocates throughout the state have been pushing for several years. I think they wanted to get it part of the HSTPA of 2019, which is a Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and it didn't. So they've been pushing for this single issue for ever since with local municipalities, towns, and cities across New York State. And also in Rochester, New York. And also they've been trying to get it passed at the state level. Spoiler alert, good cause eviction just passed. It got snuck in through state budgeting. Okay. So the good cause eviction, basically the narrative before when it first started was there's all these landlords across New York State that they keep their tenants on month-to-month leases and then we'll just kick them out to renovate the apartments. Or actually, no, this was the first narrative, is that landlords will keep tenants on month-to-month leases, and then the moment they complain about anything, right? So like a leaky sink, a clogged toilet, health and safety violations, that sort of thing, the landlord will just evict them. Like give them a 30-day notice or 90-day notice and then just evict them, right? So it's like this sort of, landlords keep tenants month to month just to basically keep them from complaining and have them living in fear. Mm-hmm. A lot of people didn't end up buying that. So the real reason for good cause eviction really was rent control. All right. And it's a good cause eviction is de facto rent control. The original legislation they wanted to pass in the city of Rochester and other towns throughout New York State was they wanted to cap lease renewals at 3%. So you could not increase rent more than 3%. If you wanted to, then you'd have to actually have a judge approve rental increases above 3%. All right. Mm-hmm. So obviously this became untenable for lawmakers across the state. What ended up happening is there was some municipalities, I think it was Beacon, New York, which is one of them, that ended up passing good cause eviction. The property owners banded together, hired an attorney, got it escalated up to through the state court systems, and then a judge struck it down as good cause being unconstitutional. That it's not constitutional unless it becomes state law. So then the tenant advocates went back to basically trying to lobby Albany for it through protests and all this other stuff. So the current version of it is not as egregious as the one that was before. The one that was before. Good cause eviction would have applied to all rental housing throughout the state. There was some small exemptions in terms of owner occupancy and that sort of thing. But with Rochester being 60% renter occupied, owner occupancy exemptions wouldn't really carry a lot of weight, right? So, so they have a watered down version that they passed. The rent increase cap is either 5% plus CPI or 10% annual increases, whichever is less. All right, so that's the provision as it pertains to the rent control or rent stabilization, if whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. There was multiple exclusions or exemptions to good cause eviction that were passed in the bill. One that's actually not too clear is anybody who owns less than 10 units is exempt from good cause eviction. Okay.
How does that work with LLCs? So if you have an LLC that only has 9 properties in it or 9 units in it, are you exempt?
So this is where things are a little bit liquid right now in terms of people not really understanding or having the most amount of clarity, is that the exemption process would have to be a proactive process that a housing provider would have to take to get their properties exempt. So you'd have to basically submit a formal document stating that I own X, Y, and Z properties. I only own this amount of properties in the state of New York. Now this applies throughout the entire state.
Mm-hmm.
The additional watered down provision, I'm gonna puke on you first, Mark, and then and then you can ask me questions. So the additional watered down provision is that good cause eviction is only applicable if a municipality opts in to good cause eviction, meaning that applying this to the city of Rochester, city council would have to vote to opt into good cause eviction. So if they don't opt in, then good cause eviction does not apply to your city or your town or municipality with their town council and stuff like that. And so in regards back to your other question, so there's like the three major fundamental like cornerstones of the legislation. Downstate got automatically thrown in with good cause eviction because this is where the most of the push was happening was from downstate, like around New York City and the 5 boroughs and stuff like that. So they're automatically enrolled in good cause eviction as soon as the law passed. So that being said, your question associated with like LLCs and that sort of thing, and ownership of units. The way that is interpreted, units is buildings. So you could own 100-unit building, and that would count as 1 unit of the 10.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So but this is throughout the state. So it's like if you have if the city of Rochester opts in, let's say, all right, the city of Rochester opts in to good cause eviction, which they very well most likely will do. If you own property in the city of Rochester, if you live in the city of Rochester, you definitely need to speak to your city council representatives as to why you are opposed to good cause eviction, so that it does not get passed. To apply pressure from our side being the housing providers and also other residents of the area that would be concerned about it being passed, for instance. So let's say city of Rochester opted in, and you own 5 buildings in the city of Rochester, but you own 5 buildings in Canandaigua, New York, or you own 5 buildings in the Adirondacks, or in the southern tier or something like that, then by technically you would not be exempt from good cause eviction because you own 10 units in the state of New York. How they would prove that, I don't know how they would prove that. Right. So it's like, the only thing I could think of is that, let's say, property owner in the city of Rochester has 5 buildings in the city of Rochester and 6 in Canandaigua, New York, which is Canandaigua is about 45 minutes away from here. Let's say the tenant got a free attorney. Okay, because that's one of the provisions. I do believe in independent counsel that tenants should have representation if they can't pay for it. Maybe Mark, you and I differ on that, but that's a different discussion. So this legal aid attorney is going to basically be like, well, they say they're exempt, but let's challenge that because do you believe they own properties in other areas, right? And the tenant's going to basically be like, I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't. So I think that what this can actually turn into is a long, protracted process of the legal aid attorney forcing the landlord's attorney into discovery, and then having like multiple hearings, for instance, to prove that you do not own something. Like, how can you do that? How can you prove like Mark, you heard that I owned a single family house in Beacon, New York. I don't, by the way. But you say, well, Matt, prove it. Prove that you don't own a single family house in Beacon, New York. I here's my tax returns. I don't have it on a Schedule E. Well, you have it as a secondary residence. So you don't have it as an income property, but you may have used it as an income property in the past. So it's just like it can turn into this whole thing where legal aid attorneys know how to game the system in terms of trying to push out the eviction process as long as humanly possible. By the way, pushing it out further as far as possible is not helping people. They get deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole. Right. So what types of programs can we do right now to get them out of the hole instead of getting them further deep into the hole, for instance? So
yeah, but I mean, their credit is so shot, and they don't care. They're not going to pay it back anyway. We see this time and time and time again.
mm-hmm.
It's exasperating the damages to the landlord by leaving them in longer, and it has absolutely no ramification on the actual tenant because they're not going to. I mean, they will recover from it eventually, but you're not going to recover any money from it ever.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, that's like after the HSTPA 2019 was passed, we made a strategic decision to not invest in housing anymore in Rochester. So, which actually turned our portfolio from, like, let's say, 90% residential to 70% residential, 30% commercial, because of what we've acquired over the past few years since that law was passed. So I think that what's egregious about this whole thing is that because of the opt-in provision, City of Rochester City Council will probably opt in to good cause eviction. My problem with it is that I would rather have it be state law and have an equal playing ground for everybody rather than having this opt-in provision. Because what's going to happen? You're going to have basically investment capital flee out of the city of Rochester, where we need the most amount of investment capital into naturally occurring affordable housing, and then will get placed into other towns, right? Like in Brighton, New York, or Penfield, or wherever, because of this. So it has a further distilling effect in terms of focusing disinvestment out of an area.
Yeah, but the places that it's going to potentially go to, I mean, you mentioned Brighton, that it's just so expensive that investors aren't really going to be drawn to that either. They'll probably continue to just battle the best they can in these city markets because they're the quote cash flow markets compared to other markets. So I don't think it's really, there'll be some people like you that are reallocating their portfolio, but a lot of people are just going to keep marching forward.
But the people that are marching forward, though, I mean, it's so you're going to have, I think, a lot of responsible housing providers that know that I need to be able to increase rents, or if I'm going to buy this project with a house that needs a new roof, needs new siding, needs new windows, needs new mechanical systems, new electrical systems, but it's occupied, I'm not going to buy that. I'm not going to buy that house and give it the desperate amount of capital that it needs. I wouldn't even say capital improvement projects. I'd say capital preservation projects. Mm-hmm. Just the amount that needs to actually make it safe and make it dignified. Like, I'm not going to touch that house, right? So who's going to be left? It's going to be your I hate to use the term loser, but some loser out of New York City that sees a $50,000 house and sees a gold mine out of it, right? So you've probably had clients you've worked with before.
Yeah, but he's going to get hammered by the city, and he's not going to be able to. Maybe those trades will still happen, but those guys are also kind of reeling from the crackdown that the city's had in the last couple of years.
So what's been happening in that regard?
Oh, they're maniacal. Before they would try to work with you, and if somebody like me that would buy a distressed property, we could have an action plan that would be reasonable, where you got to give us time to get some of this really, really deferred stuff taken care of. It's like you said, some of them have tenants, and working around the tenant can be difficult. So it might be better to wait for a turnover to do some of the more extensive CapEx. You're going to spend twice as much money on CapEx if you do it at different times. I'm going to do this now and I'm going to do that then. It costs more money. If you can just do it all at once, you're going to have that scale. And when your contractors are in, you're going to be able to get stuff done affordably. So the city is really pushing for fines, especially for out-of-state landlords and management companies, to have a lot of these issues rectified very, very quickly. And not only that, that's fine. People need safe, clean housing, but now they're getting very, very nitpicky on what will pass and what won't pass. Where before, you you had to do this. Now it's like, oh, no. Now we want you to, let's use the basements, for example. And it's inspector dependent too. Some inspectors are a little more reasonable because they've been doing it for a long time. And others are just like, nope, this is what I was trained. And this is what, excuse me, you're going to have to do. So you go into the basement of some of these older Rochester homes before block, when you've got some flagstone foundations, and you'll have a little bit of mortar work that needs to be done, right? That's very common. Before we would go in and we would patch as necessary, make sure these foundations are 2.5, 3 feet thick. So like, you have a little loose rock on one edge of the foundation. It's not a big deal. You get it back in. Now they want you to sparge coat the entire basement wall with cement. That's, depending on the size of the property, if you're talking about like a 10-unit property or something, that could easily be $30,000, $40,000. Where before you could send in a maintenance tech, he'd be there all day getting all the little spots. Everything would look nice. He'd clean it up. You would pass. Now they're like, no. We want a mason in here to sparge coat the entire basement. It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The other reason why good cause eviction, I forgot to mention this, the reason why good cause eviction is also a disaster is because, the non-renewal, or, we call it DNR. Doesn't stand for do not resuscitate. It means do not renew, was our way of, if a tenant was an a-hole or was disrespectful to other tenants of the building, or just generally like, not a great tenant that like, pays like after, basically right when the 14-day notice expires every month, or he had to file on them two times. That was our basically insurance policy to get a unit back and fire a customer, right? So, if I had tenants that knew that they couldn't smoke inside their apartments, but they chose to do so anyway, and I gave them notice after notice after notice, and then they'd flat out deny, I'm not smoking in my apartment. I was like, well, why does it smell like old cigarettes in your apartment? Oh, well, I smoke out in my car, and I come into the house and stuff like that. Meanwhile, I have tenants that have children with asthma that are complaining to me, saying that they need to move out, that they can't live there any longer because somebody's smoking in there. The easiest way for me to get the tenant out was basically lease is up. I'm not renewing your lease. You have to find someplace else to live. Okay. With good cause eviction, if that tenant contests that, then you have to go to court. They have to, which you have to do anyways through a holdover proceeding, but you have to go to court and prove to a judge who's completely disconnected from the situation as to why this person has violated their lease. All right. Well, I sent here, Judge, Your Honor, there's 3 notices here that I sent them. Legal aid attorney is going to say, well, this is very, this is very discriminatory. That my client never smoked in the apartment. It's the next door neighbor that smokes, not them. And you're singling them out, that sort of thing. And I was like, well, we gave them notices. Like, you have to take our word that they're doing this and violating the lease.
You're going to need some kind of proof. Yeah. You got to go in. So like our property manager will get photos, it's obvious that people are smoking in the house. They'll have ashtrays. There'll be, different things that you can take to court to try to back up your cause. But ultimately, yeah, I agree with you. Like having a reason that's like a lease violation reason for termination of the lease is much more difficult than just doing a holdover petition when they get past their. So for us, yeah, we'll give violation letters and stuff, but we're probably not going to use that for the eviction cause. We're going to use, we ended the lease, they held over, and we're just going to go through the procedure that way.
So Mark, let me ask you this, because you have like a much more global view of what's happening in our market in terms of behaviors and trends, that sort of thing. Let me ask you this. How many people do you know of that like they'll find let's say a 4-family house that has apartments that are, $200 below market. And then at the moment they buy that house, they just give everybody notices to vacate, and then they go through and renovate all the units, and then, basically gentrify the neighborhood, for instance. Like, does that happen a lot, or is it like, yeah, it happens once in a while? Like, tell me about that.
I would say not as often as you think. You might have like smaller people that have a very niche, what they provide, like, okay, they're buying on one or two streets because they really want to make a difference on those two streets. They're the kind of people that will go in and, turn over the whole unit at once, whether it's a 10, 20, 30, whatever, however many units, they'll turn them all over. When you get into the multiple units, it is harder. So, what I usually advise people is to kind of do it in stages, do them as things turn over, because you don't want to get rid of all your cash flow, have vacancy, have all these expenditures. If you're really well capitalized, sure, you can do it. But for the most part, I think investors are pretty cognizant about cash flow coming in, and, not having cash flow coming in when they're doing renovations. So I would say, no, they're not usually doing that unless the building is really, really, really deferred and really low in current occupancy. Like I'm working with a seller downtown on Chestnut, and he's got 54 unit building with about 3 tenants in it. So yeah, in that case, obviously that building would be 100% done and then released. But if you've got a building that's, say it's a 54 unit and 34 of them are rented, that's probably a case where you would do the 20 that are vacant and then have some kind of strategic plan to turn over the other 30 over time.
Yeah, I mean, with me, it's like how many 20 to 30 unit buildings are across the city of Rochester? Not much, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
most of our housing stock is like single family houses, small multis, maybe 2 to 3 family type of stuff. Mostly 2 family for for stuff that's multi unit or multiple dwellings. And I can speak from experience. Like I've bought properties that had like legacy tenants in there, and what I do is I'd like, okay, their apartment is going to cost probably 25, 30 grand to turn over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a wait and see. So if I buy the property, the tenant pays the rent like clockwork, keeps their unit clean, like is not disturbing other tenants. Like I'll just keep them. I mean, I have 2 tenants over on South Avenue that that I've had since I bought the building, and the previous owner had since he bought the building. And like they're perfect. They don't disturb anybody. They pay rent like clockwork. Yes, their apartments are like $300 below market rent, but I'm just like, you know what? They'll move out eventually. At that point in time, I'll put the 25, 30 grand into those units, for instance. At that point in time, like I think that a lot more housing providers think that way rather than, hey, this is an amazing opportunity. I can go in here, I can boot everybody out of this 3 family house and then renovate them and jack up the rents. I think, yes, there are some people that do that, but I just don't think it's like the systemic thing where we need to create a law that's statewide that basically drops an atomic bomb on naturally occurring affordable housing. Because now with me, I'm like, geez, now the city of Rochester might pass good cause eviction if not now, but sometime in the future. Like I have to start increasing these rents up to market rents with these tenants here, because what happens if taxes go up? Like what happens if all these other things go up? I'm going to be, I'm going to be capped at, let's say 7% per year to catch up. Like, $300 a month is a large percentage amount over 500 bucks. So I think what's actually ended up happening is there's going to be people that with the state law passing and be like, all right, we got to bring them up the market. And that's what I'm advising all of my colleagues to do. Like, just bring your apartments up the market, stop kicking the can down the road, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. So I just got out of the assessor's office on Friday to challenge my new assessments. In the city of Rochester, every 4 years, you get a reassessment depending on what district you're in or whatever. So in 4 years, they're claiming that a lot of my properties have had over 100% in change in value in 4 years, which it's ridiculous. And when you try to explain to them, look, I have, just like you, properties that I purchased, at a good price, a fair price. And I've got older tenants that are on a fixed income. They've got Medicare, Medicaid, they're retired. I've kept their rents low, same situation. The previous owner probably had them too low, definitely had them too low. And I've left them there because, these people are in their 70s and in their 80s, and they can't afford anymore. Like, and they'll tell you that, like, if the rent goes up, I have to leave and find another place. And, where am I going to go? I'm not going to be able to find a place to go.
Oh yeah.
And so when our tax bills double, and we have to pass it on, or we're gonna lose our ass. So
Mhm.
I think we're gonna be in Rochester specifically. We're gonna be seeing a lot of this happening where older people are getting displaced because the landlords are really forced to increase the rents significantly to account for a doubling of the taxes.
Mhm.
When you're charging $600-700 for rent because you're trying to be nice and help the community and not displace these elderly people. So I think that's going to be a huge issue coming forward.
So, how much was the actual increase in tax amount? I mean, I know the, assessments went up tremendously, but then the tax rate goes down per thousand when they do a citywide reassessment. So tell me about that.
I haven't dug into the details yet on the exact numbers. I just, I saw the assessment change and was just like, I've got to at least try to fight this.
Mhm.
But you go in and they say, okay, well, why are you saying it's worth this? And you're like, well, yeah, there are some strong comps in this particular neighborhood, but overall, 80% of the housing stock is still very deferred. It's still, going to trade for a lower price, but a lot of these legacy landlords don't really sell their houses, right? They keep them for decades and generations and give them to their kids. And so
Mhm.
the trades that we're seeing in the marketplace are stuff where people go in, they put a little lipstick, or maybe it's a full flip. And so now we've got, very limited inventory coming to the market. The inventory that does come tends to be closer to a finished product that sells for a huge premium. And now, my property that I bought for a modest price because, I did have to do some work. I probably had to put a roof, furnace, some mechanics, get some of that older deferred maintenance taken care of, is now being assessed at a level of like somebody flipping a house. And they're like, nope, there's only 6 comps that we could find. I'm sorry. And
Mhm.
they really don't care where the comps are coming from. Like, as a real estate professional, I know that on one side of the street, the values are 30% higher than on the other side of the street. They
Mhm.
don't care. Like, they're like, well, it's only, zero point 0.2 miles. I'm like, yeah, well, 0.2 miles makes a huge difference when
Mhm.
you're actually in the field selling properties or buying properties. And none of those nuances will trickle through. So
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the fight that I had I had a couple of 4 families in the Pearl Megs Monroe neighborhood. I live in the Park Avenue neighborhood. It's adjacent to Pearl Megs Monroe. For those people watching this that might be out of town, but Park Avenue is like the kind of like a white collar kind of area. It's a nice area. A lot of people, young people live there. Although we feel old now compared to all the other people living there. Pearl Mix Monroe is definitely very, very, it's very, very blue collar. There's a lot of a lot of panhandling, a lot of drug activity, and it's a neighborhood adjacent to ours, right? So I brought these 4 families in that they were raising the assessment from $160,000 to $260,000, and I was like, "There's no way." So I went in, I fought it, and the assessor told me when he was like making his case in front of the board of assessment review, this is the really trendy Park Avenue area. Uh, you know, values have gone up, and this is what we believe. This is what we believe, and they've been trading for $60,000 a unit. So therefore, that's the reason why this is reasonable, or $70,000 a unit. This is why this is reasonable. And I was like, this is not the Park Avenue neighborhood. It's Pearl Megs Monroe. It's not Park Avenue. Like there's guys that are that pass out in the front porch of these properties with needles sticking out of their arms.
yeah,
So it's not the same. It's not the same neighborhood. Plus, one thing that I think that the city needs to do, and I'm not sure if other cities do this across New York State, is change this stupid thing with the commercial tax rate. Like, the residential tax rate in the city of Rochester, I believe, is like in the low 30s per thousand.
hmm,
Um, and then once you go from a 3-family to a 4-family, the tax rate jumps up to like $55 a thousand.
yeah,
Um, and like for what? One additional unit? And the thing is that it's not like we have like a Macy's that's there that's like adding to the total tax base like they do with like, let's say, Eastview Mall in Victor, which is a huge regional shopping mall. Um, like it's not like that, right? It's like this is just more units. It doesn't mean that the tenants pay more in rent or whatever. And so that one there, I mean, if that assessment sticks, that's $2,000 a year increase in taxes. And same situation, I have most of the people there are legacy tenants from when I originally bought the buildings, and they're like, older people that are on fixed income that, they're paying like 60% of their income to rent. And oh, by the way, I'm like charging them like $525 a month in rent. All right.
Yeah.
And so the assessor says, well, you should increase the rent up to market rent, which is like $950. I was like, they can't afford that. What you're telling me to displace this person so I can pay this tax based upon an assessed value is not even correct.
Right.
So yeah, but I think people definitely are going to be surprised that got letters in the mail with, their principal residence went up in assessed value by $100,000, but on the letter it says your proposed taxes will go up $200. So a lot of people were like, $200 a year, that's like, $20 a month or something like that. I'm not going to bother going in. That's before everybody else like myself that contests their unfair assessment goes in, gets their assessments reduced, and then you're going to be boned because you didn't go in and fight your unfair assessment, because they're going to have to readjust the tax rate per thousand. They can't just be like, damn it, guys, we gave it the good old college try to get these assessments increased. So we're going to have to cut our budget by 15% this year because of that. It's not the way it works.
Yeah. No, the other big problem that's going to happen when all these taxes go up and people are faced with that hard decision, like, how do I move forward if my cash flow is not going to support my expenditures? Obviously you got to raise the rents, but a lot of times when you have these legacy tenants, when they get out of there, you're looking at a significant turnover cost, right? I would say easily $20,000 on your average unit from a tenant that's been in there 10 plus years. So what if you're not capitalized enough? You're a smaller mom and pop landlord that just kind of does this for like retirement. What is that going to look like?
I think that a lot of the mom and pop landlords in New York State are going to be the way of the dinosaur. I think that the only way to survive in this is having a critical mass of enough units to have economies of scale to run these. I'm going to call them businesses. They're businesses. Rental housing is a business. I just don't think that unless you're self-performing everything as a mom and pop landlord, you're just not going to be able to hold your head above water, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And, I agree. And the problem is that the prices have escalated so much that any kind of increase in operational expenses makes a razor thin deal bad, right? So how are we going to operate in that marketplace? The only people that are going to buy real estate are wealthy people that understand they're getting, tax advantages, they're getting principal pay down by the tenant, but they're not going to be focused on cash flow because the cash flow is non-existent. It really is.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on good cause? I mean, kind of on your, like, what I got the reading from you is like, people get through it. No big deal.
It's more bureaucracy. And anytime you have that, there's more cost. So I expect our cost is going to go up dealing with this, whether it's even more extended evictions. When I first started in the business, it was like 3 months, and that was brutal because, I was working my butt off with 2 jobs, trying to start a family, trying to get educated at the same time. And then having somebody that's not paying me on a house that I have a mortgage on. I've got to pay the taxes. I've got to pay the insurance. They're doing damages. Like, that stuff just drove me nuts. In 3 months, I was like, I would lose sleep over 3 months. And now fast forward today, it's like 8 months is not, it was only 8 months to get somebody out of my house. It didn't take a year. It didn't take a year and a half. It's like, what is going on? And I think a lot of that, like, a lot of people are still in shock, and they haven't really stopped, like to do a little bit of math. Right. And I think that's where I want to get done this year is like, okay, let's look at what's happened over the last 3 years and let's do some data analysis and let's see, how bad our original hypothesis has been just derailed with this lost rent and bad debts and, with COVID stuff that happened. And I mean, I think somebody just needs to really take a look. at the numbers, because even when you're getting the ERAP and you're getting the Catholic charity money, you never got 100% whole. It was just kind of like kicking down the can, and you were like,
Mhm.
oh, I really need that money. They're going to send me $6,000 and they owe
Mhm.
me $6,000. This is awesome. But by the time you get that same tenant out again, now they owe you $10,000 or they owe you $12,000. So you got 6 in the short term, but then you lost 12 in the long term. So I think a lot of people needed the money to pay the mortgages, right? Because there was a little bit of forbearance, but not much. And
Mhm.
then, we're in this mess where I still have tenants from before COVID in certain properties that are,
Mhm.
up for eviction. And it's just like, how do you even analyze something like that that's been going on for years, where there's some relief, sometimes you don't know what relief's coming, and then all of a sudden, it's just, it's really hard to discern. I think that, real estate investors are going to realize that, we've been beaten badly. And, for me personally, I'm going to pivot towards Class A, because those are the kind of tenants that don't have these same issues of non-payment, of eviction, of bad debt. Now your cash flow goes from like marginal at best to negative when you get into Class A assets, but maybe that's better. Maybe your negative Class A purchase is actually better than your quote cash flow Class C, when you
Mhm.
add up all these different costs that are associated with ownership.
Oh, I wholeheartedly believe so. I mean, the deals that I have bought that are Class A, and we're just, Class A is relative, right? So, I own a lot of assets in the Park Avenue area, which is a high demand area, high income area, and after I get done refinancing those properties, like they're basically like kind of like at break even, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine by me. I'm like, okay, I'm paying down a massive amount of debt, which is building my equity position. I already got all my money out of the properties because I was able to, buy them right and then refinance them. And so I'm certainly not holding on to them for cash flow. But the thing is that when I go and look at my rent roll and on my properties that are owned in good locations, like there's no past due balances. There's not even one number of like NSFs, bounce checks or late charges, anything like that. And then I pull up my other rent roll on properties that are more like, lower income to moderate income. And it's just like massive balances being carried, tons of like bounced payments, that sort of thing. And I don't know, I made the argument the other day, like, I think that we've had a systemic shift because I got used to holding economically vacant units for a long time post COVID, dovetailed with the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. So I've kind of gotten conditioned. I'm like, well, if I'm not going to get paid for a unit, I'd rather just have it vacant and
Mm-hmm.
get somebody that I know is going to be able to perform and be a good tenant. So I mean, there's some apartment units that I've had that are just turnkey, ready to move, ready for a tenant to move in tomorrow if they wanted to, that have been vacant for almost a year.
Wow.
So, because I just don't like, dude, the previous tenant I had, took me 2.5 years to get them out.
Yeah.
Like, and they used every trick in the book to prolong the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just like, dude, just keep it vacant. I don't care. Like, I don't care.
That might be one that you just sell, you know?
Well, it's part of like a 28 unit building. So,
Oh, okay. I
um,
gotcha.
so yeah, so I'm just like, I got used to this being, I used to hate vacancies in the past. I would like, before the HSTPA 2019, if I had a marginal tenant that came in with like, 550 credit score, they had, some utility collection bills because their parents put their utility bills in their name when they were 4 years old. Um, and I would basically like, okay, come up with a double security deposit.
You can't do
Pay.
that anymore.
I know, but this is what I used to do. Come up
Okay.
with a double security deposit. All right. And pay perfectly on time every month for 12 months. And if you want to stay, what I'll do is I'll refund you your security deposit, your other half of security deposit, and apply it towards rent. All right. I used to do deals like that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and a lot of those deals ended up working out. Sometimes they didn't. All right. But a lot of them ended up working out. And so now we can't do that anymore, right? So it's like, okay, well, we have 3 times monthly rent. We have 680 credits, 680 credit score minimum, and we're just holding it for longer, vacant.
Yeah, 680 in some areas is pretty much impossible. I mean, we've got units where we'll never see a 680 credit score.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. But anyways, yeah, people listening to this right now, good cause eviction, make sure to preemptively contact your town council person or city council person. If you have a local rep and city council, contact them like a district rep. Also contact the city council representatives that are at large. Okay. The city council representatives at large in your city are ones that they represent everybody. Okay. So, contact them and tell them your concerns over good cause eviction. One bad tenant in a neighborhood that turns their apartment into a drug house, for instance, which happened to me just recently, can destabilize an entire neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Very quickly.
Rowley Street, for instance. I live on Rowley Street in the city of Rochester. There was over an 18-month period, there was 3 drug houses that popped up 2 doors down from my house. Because what these drug dealers do is they find people that are addicts and they say, listen, I'll give you your supply for free. Let me operate out of your apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And you can drive down Rowley Street right now. And because of this whole thing happening, it has the most amount of properties that are for sale and have sold in the past like 12 months. It's like,
Wow.
it looks like mass exodus on Rowley Street because of that.
Yeah.
That's how this shit can destabilize neighborhoods. So who do you want to have the power to have what customers live in their house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want a judge to have control over that people? Or do you want your neighbor who owns the property to have control over that, to fire that customer? That's the question you want to ask.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I have a client that just picked up 12 units, I think, on Raleigh.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll make sure you don't have any drug dealers in our building. And if there are, just let us know and we'll get them out for you.
Yeah.
We'll get them out the old-fashioned way. So.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, right. I'm like, dude, if there was somebody who started a business like Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap or something like that, I mean, that would be a 7-figure, if not 8-figure business. All right.
Yeah.
Just like
for sure.
But hopefully your client puts a ton of money into those units. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So
the units are actually pretty decent. She's got some CapEx on the exterior, so you'll see us over there painting probably at least one of the properties, if not both.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do some roofing, a little carpentry, but inside is actually pretty good. Tenant base all looks really good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, man. You want to play some hooky and get out of here?
Let's do it. Thanks everybody for coming on to the Misfits of Real Estate podcast. We really appreciate it. If you don't mind smashing the like button, share our content. We'll keep it coming.